Hello, BookTube. In this episode of my reading history, I'm going to focus on the part of my library that I call classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. But before I get to the history itself, I do want to define what I mean by classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary. You get the idea. So, for classics, I use the original usage of the term to refer to the surviving literature of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. This definition has expanded over the years to include the major works, as well as everything published before the 20th century. But I like to use the original usage of the term because I do have a small classics collection in my library. But on occasion, I will use the classics in the sense of the major works published before the 20th century because this part of my library has a too long name, largely because I can't come up with something better. But that's why sometimes I will drop the next part of the definition, which is canonical, which basically refers to the major works. Not so much with the time designation, although you can infer it that way, that a lot of the works that are canonical would probably be before the 20th century, even though I don't really have much of that in my collection as it stands right now. Modern is the 20th century, and contemporary is the 21st century. And fiction, poetry, and so for fiction, I largely mean both canonical fiction as well as what's come to be called literary fiction, which is a merged genre of realistic fiction, modernist fiction, postmodernist fiction, that has ambitions of literary quality. Whether or not they succeed in that is up to the reader and critics. And then poetry and drama really doesn't need much of a definition because it's poetry and drama. So, in my mind, this group of literatures makes sense to group them together rather than separating them out. I have on occasion separated out my poetry collection because it has ballooned over the last few years, but it doesn't quite feel right. I feel like they should all be together, so they currently are, even though that does not give them much space to expand, if I wanted to expand them. Which I might get to at the end of this video, if things work out, because I've been trying to make this video for weeks now and I haven't had so much success, but maybe this one will be the time. So, the first canonical works I ever encountered were part of the Great Illustrated Classics reprint line. I'm pretty sure I had more than the 5 I remember, but I distinctly remember 5. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Of the 5, I know for sure I read A Tale of Two Cities and Treasure Island. I think I read The Jungle Book, but I might have just stared at the pictures. So the Great Illustrated Classics line is, or was, a series of reprints of canonical works with chapter illustrations and spot illustrations throughout the book. I know for sure I never read Ivanhoe. And I think I might have tried The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but I don't remember. I don't recall for sure if I read it or just skimmed it. So I read some of these works, and I guess I liked them well enough, but they haven't left a lasting impression, which is one thing that I have to grapple with in this video, is that, in this part of my reading history, is that to what extent have these works that I'm going to be talking about really left an impression that has endured, rather than just, I liked it, which usually means it's okay, but not like something that blew my socks off or changed my world or whatever. It's just, it was okay. So I read these great illustrated classics when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. And I wouldn't return to the classics or the canonical. See, I'm kind of interchanging things here. Until I was 14, the spring of 1998, when I was transitioning from comic books and detective fiction to eventually would be science fiction and fantasy, with classics, canonical, modern and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama sort of being a co-interest at this point. And that happened because of H. Rider Haggard. So somewhere around this time, my family discovered Dover. Dover is a reprint publisher that specializes in discount reprints of canonical works or older works. I think my brother picked up a book of architecture by Le Corbusier because he wanted to be an architect when he was younger. Things did not work out. And on the back of the covers, there was a list of more books from Dover, and also, I think, a means of contacting them to get a catalog sent out. So we did that, and we got numerous catalogs sent over the years. And one of those catalogs featured their literature offerings. And I immediately gravitated to an omnibus edition of H. Rider Haggard's work that featured She, King Solomon's Mines, and Alan Quatermain. I gravitated towards this omnibus because of the 1980s adaptations of King Solomon's Mines and Alan Quatermain, starring Richard Chamberlain and Sharon Stone, which I was a fan of when I was younger. I haven't seen them in years, so I don't know if I would still like them or if I would be like how I've since experienced a lot of stuff that I liked as a child or teenager that, what the hell was I thinking? But anyway, so I read She, King Solomon's Mines, Alan Quatermain, and I liked them. And then during the Christmas break of that year, so 1998 into 1999, I read A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens and rather liked it. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which I did not like at all. It did not connect with me at all. And when I went back to school, so this would have been the spring semester of my freshman year, my principal noticed that I read, that I was a reader. So he recruited me for an academic competition. So in Texas, interschool competition is governed by an organization called UIL. And they regulate not only sport, but also cultural and academic competitions, which is usually what is called UIL. The academic side of this is. And so I was recruited for literary criticism, even though I was way too young and really had no idea about anything when it came to literary criticism at this point. I just like to read. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know necessarily if they really should have had a literary criticism competition at that. Because a lot of the stuff, if I remember correctly, you really wouldn't get until you were either much like junior or senior or even collegiate level. So I'm not entirely sure what the wisdom of having literary criticism as a subject was. But I participated. I did not do well. But it did get me interested in becoming shifting my interest to a more literary mind frame when it came time to go to college. That instead of being a history professor or a scientist, I started to want to be a professor of English, of having an academic career focusing on literature. Things did not work out. So there is that. Now, the next year, I ended up being recruited for a different subject because my history teacher noticed that I was really into history, that I was really good at it. So I was recruited for current events. I don't think they had a history competition. Should have. And I did really well in that. I went to state that year, and I placed 5th or 6th. Unfortunately, when they were making the questions, they relied on the previous night's news. And I went to bed before that, so a lot of the questions I did not get, which kind of ticked me off. But anyway, so that was the first time I went to Austin. And the intention was for the group I was with, which would have been me, the teacher in charge of the particular competition, the principal, and his daughter, who was had a competition of her own. And so the day before the competition, we went around downtown Austin looking for Barnes & Noble. I don't know why we didn't go to Book People, but we didn't. We went to looked for Barnes & Noble and eventually settled on a used bookstore, which I'm pretty sure probably was somehow or other like an academic used bookstore. And so I picked up The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, Giants in the Earth, or Giants of the Earth by Uwe Rulevag, and maybe the first volume of the Norton Anthology of English Literature. Although I might have picked that out somewhere else, maybe a garage sale or somebody just gave it to me. And I read those 3 during my high school years, and I liked them. And then I also started getting into the Nobel Prize in Literature, and so I picked up, I think around this time, The Rat by Günter Grass, which I liked, although subsequent attempts at rereading it 20 years later did not quite work out. Midak Ali by Naguib Mahfouz. The House Gun by Nadine Gordimer. And then into like senior year, I also picked up some gay literature. Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran. City of Night by John Recchi. Mysterious Skin by Scott Heim. Dream Boy by Jim Grimsley. The Spell by Alan Hollinghurst. I also think I picked up The Robber Bride by Margaret Atwood, and a few others. And on my first trip to Book People, while I went to go visit St. Edward's University, where I went to undergrad, I picked up Word of Mouth, edited by Timothy Liu, and An Arrow's Flight by Mark Merlis. And then once I got to college, I would go to Book People every few weeks and pick up some stuff I could be found equally either in science fiction and fantasy, which will be the subject of the next episode of this tour, and the fiction and poetry sections. And I picked up a lot of stuff. Some more Margaret Atwood, Barbara Gowdy, Source by Mark Doughty, Voluntary Servitude by Mark Wunderlich, a collection by Jerry Gomez Perlberg, which I have been trying to find for 20 years now and I can't find it. View with a Grain of Sand by Wisława Szymborska, can't forget about that, and numerous others, many of which I no longer have because once this period of my life ended, I got rid of much of them. Although, strangely, I also have kicked myself in the butt for a lot of this, that I got rid of a lot of this. And then once I went to San Francisco for graduate school for a few months, I spent quite a bit of time looking for bookstores, and I found quite a few. There was a book sale room in one of the campus buildings at San Francisco State that had that sold books. That I've picked up a few. Hesiod came from there. I think my Marlowe omnibus came from there as well. And Swim Two Boys by Jamie O'Neill, I think, came from that store. There was also, near where I lived, there were two bookstores. One of which I actually found like my last day or two at San Francisco. And then the other one where I picked up some literary criticism. And also some science fiction and fantasy and my first actual volume of manga, so that bookstore will appear in later episodes. There's also a bookstore on the Castro where I picked up some more, some Dennis Cooper, I think some more Alan Hollinghurst. Certainly The Folding Star. I could swear I picked up The Line of Beauty at Book People, but I don't see a sticker, so it must have been at this bookstore in San Francisco and a few others. Also, while I was an undergrad at St. Edward's, I did go to Powell's, the bookstore in Portland, Oregon, because we went to Portland for a conference where I picked up some more Dennis Cooper. And there was also a used bookstore where I picked up the Swimming Pool Library. And so, more books. And also, I started to order used books online as well, which is where I got a lot of the poetry collections from the posts that were featured in Word of Mouth. So once my college career was done, I gradually lost interest in these books, and over time, most of them left my collection. And when I started my channel back in 2019, I had basically all of classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama would have taken up my headboard bookcase. Some of the books would have been on top, particularly like The Complete Shakespeare, but many of them would have been on the second shelf. And once I discovered BookTube in 2016, I kind of started to easing my way back into particularly contemporary fiction, because a lot of what's on BookTube, particularly when I first discovered it, was geared towards contemporary fiction, with some classics, canonical work, fiction thrown in. And I didn't get on with it for the most part. Some things I managed to read and like in the okay sense. Nothing ever really knocked my socks off and to the point where I'm like, this is life-changing or revelatory. It was just, it's okay. And I got back into poetry. My poetry collection is no longer perpetually paltry. It is pretty much enough to fill up a small bookcase. And I have started to add more classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama to my collection over the last few years. Even though, again, I don't... I like them in the sense that they're okay. When I do like them and I don't bail on them. But I don't know, I get the sense periodically that I should pay more attention to this part of my collection, that it should be more prominent, that it should take up more wall space, more shelf space than the 2 bookcases that currently I'm giving it. Even though even though my feelings, like when I actually read them and think about my my feelings for them, that they don't really warrant those feelings that I should want more. I don't know. I think part of the reason why I wanted to make this video was to try to figure out this contradiction. The fact that on the one hand, they really don't do anything for me outside of taking up some time, versus the feelings that I should like them more than I do, that I should prioritize collecting them and adding them to my library, that there should be more than just 2 shelves worth of classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. And I'm not entirely sure how to work this out. And I'm not entirely sure this video quite helped me in the way I hoped it would, but hopefully I'll figure it out, or have a healthier means of maybe, okay, if I have a strong desire for something, pick it up, try it. If I like it, okay. If I don't, okay. But that this part of my collection should be fluid. It should come in and it should go out. Come in, go out. Without much mental anguish involved. But anyway, so that's all I have for you today, BookTube. I will be back hopefully at some point with the science fiction and fantasy part of my reading history, which should have a more settled, at least for the moment, trajectory, because I really have lost all interest in the prose form of science fiction and fantasy. But tomorrow I will have my April reading plan, which I think I'm going to try to bring down some possibilities of what I want to try to do. And then there will also be a manga haul for my March pre-orders. They should be coming in sometime this week. And also a second attempt at weekly reads from last week, which did not upload. Like, I filmed the video, but for whatever reason, my Chromebook did not save it, which bummed me out. So hopefully this video actually uploads, because that really would bum me out. But anyway, BookTube, until I see you tomorrow, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.